So Mom, as I knew her, was only able to celebrate 75 of those birthdays due to her ultimate passing from a blood disorder called myelofibrosis. So that's an uncommon form of chronic leukemia. It's a cancer that affects blood-forming tissues in the body. It's a serious bone marrow disorder that disrupts the body's normal production of blood cells due to a genetic mutation of those blood cells, actually of the blood stem cells. It's not clear what causes that mutation, but as the mutated blood stem cells replicate and divide, they pass along that mutation to the new cells, and as more and more of those mutated cells are created, they begin to have serious effects on blood production. The end result is usually a lack of red blood cells and an overabundance of white blood cells that scars and hardens the bone marrow, and it eventually becomes fatal. So anyway, I wanted to educate you on that. Don't want to bring the room down. So the rest of this will be more of a celebration, but I wanted you to know the driving motivation of the dedication. And that's so AIC students can be educated on and informed scholarship on diseases of the blood, and blood is tested in this room. So there you go. So with that being said, now time to talk a little bit about my mom. Vince, stop looking at me like that. My mom actually used the name O'Shaughnessy for the majority of her life, and for her that was her true name. And you certainly knew, if you knew how she cooked, you would certainly say that she was more Irish, as her married name would suggest, than Italian. She was not a good cook whatsoever. In fact, my mom was a first-generation Italian-American, and for this and for other reasons I'll touch on, I intentionally chose her maiden name of Guarnera as the namesake of the laboratory. Even so, much like O'Shaughnessy, the name Guarnera is often misspelled and mispronounced. It's a hard G versus a gua sound. It's a silent R in the middle, much like I have silent G's and H's in O'Shaughnessy. My cousins will say it's the gua pronunciation because they've dealt with a lifetime of mispronunciations, and even Heather this morning, we had a joke about it as well.
That's why I didn't say it out loud.
My mother also really hated the name Dorothy. She was born the same year that The Wizard of Oz came out. It was a lifetime curse for her. So it's okay to refer to it as Dottie's testing lab. She'd probably prefer it that way anyway. So anyway, her first generation story began when her father, Rosario Peppino Guarnera, came over from Calabria, Italy. And he came over as a little boy. His name was Americanized to Joseph Rosario Guarnera, but even for further confusion, his nickname that stuck was Jim. So even though his name was Joseph, people called him Jim. Little Jimmy Guarnera grew up and was educated in Springfield schools in the South End, in a house that's now the site of the Meineke Muffler Shop, just around the corner from Starbucks. So you probably have seen it if you're Starbucks people. He put himself through the Mass College of Pharmacy, graduating in 1932. He later owned Delahanty Drugstore, located in the former Lincoln Hall on Rifle Street near the water shops on the edge of Springfield College. That building was eventually demolished from damage suffered on the June 1st, 2011 hurricane. That was also my birthday. Dates kind of play into the story a little bit, so that's just one of the dates. Jim Guarnera later founded and owned Wilbraham Pharmacy from 1956 to 1979. That was located on Boston Road in North Wilbraham, and is now the current location of Wilbraham Wine and Spirits. I go there once in a while, but it's just to look around and remember childhood memories, and not for the purpose of what its current business is, of course. My grandfather actually passed away on January 15th, 1988, 31 years ago today, and on my mom's 50th birthday. My grandmother Beatrice, Jim's wife of 52 years, let go exactly 1 year later. So today's date has much history in my family, and to celebrate their memories, I've chosen the Guarnera name. So the healthcare profession is also pretty significant in my family, as I'm shaking here now. Take some time. My mom was an RN. She graduated from St. Vincent School of Nursing in Worcester in 1959. Her brother, my Uncle John, graduated from Mass College of Pharmacy and was a pharmacist. My brother Michael has become an OBGYN, and my brother Kevin is a fertility acupuncturist. There are some high hopes for me when I first enrolled in pharmacy school, but then I bailed when I realized it wasn't possible to own a mom and pop pharmacy like my grandfather did anymore. I didn't feel like I wanted to be in the emerging chain stores of CVS and Walgreens. So I jumped ship into educational administration, and AIC has been stuck with me ever since. So my mom was an RN. You might expect me to say that she was an amazing nurse, and heck yeah, she was. And Mary actually knew her as an RN. I don't know where Mary went, but there you go. Mary, as a young buck in nursing school, worked with my mom at Ludlow Hospital. So I don't really know that she was a great nurse from direct care experience, because in order to be an amazing nurse, you have to know the difference of and BS of your kid faking it or exaggerating being sick and what the real deal is and how to handle that. Fortunately, most of my life has been free of having to deal with the real deal, so she didn't have much sympathy for me when I wanted to stay home from school. She was a working single mom for most of my life and didn't have the time for fake sick. And unless you had a spiked fever, some sort of spots on your face, or collapsed on the floor, you were going to school. So, many of you have heard me speak about my mom with amazing admiration and fondness, and that's certainly genuine. She shaped me and influenced me more than anyone in this world. At the same time, we didn't have the most perfect relationship. It was actually really complicated and challenging at times because we were just way too much alike. We bickered more than we celebrated and were highly critical of one another. We both wanted each other to be better, and those expectations were really impossible for either of us to achieve. And though both of us worked to build and support friends and even strangers in our own personal and professional lives, we sometimes struggled to build and support each other because we were very much alike, and what we noticed about each other were our biggest faults. And all we ever picked on was our biggest faults, and they were the exact same faults. And we shared many of them. In the greater world, my mom held it important to learn about, understand, and try her best to accept the individuality of others, even if that individuality was counter to how she chose to live her own personal life. This sentiment grew exponentially and stronger through time, especially from her transition at first to being a single mom, and then mind-blowingly more when she became a grandmother. Just being a grandmother and then having teenage boys as grandsons really just changed her a lot and really gave her a broader perspective of the world. My mother completely freaked out about the small stuff in life, but rolled with the big stuff, moved on, and taught her kids to do the same. Her unconditional understanding of a person's individuality, her ability to manage her kids, and her loved ones when bad choices did happen, and her recognition of inner struggle is probably her greatest legacy to me. That, and of course, for those of you that know me well, her love for Disney. But those two are related, and I promise this is ending soon. In 1964, my mother attended the World's Fair in New York. Featured at the World's Fair was a pavilion imagineered by Walt Disney. Not the company, the actual man himself, Walt Disney, influenced this pavilion. And it was brought to life through the design concepts and artistry of Mary Blair, who's one of my favorite artists. It was called It's a Small World. My mother was really struck by it, and I think it helped explains her lifetime respect and understanding of difference. A respect, she would hold even if she didn't fully understand or agree with that difference. My parents split in 1979 when I was 6 years old, and in 1980, my mother wanted to make sure our family vacation was extra special. And she wanted to prove that she could do something on her own. So she saved up every penny for a year. She packed up her 4 kids on a vacation for the first time that was not led and planned by my father. And for the first time in 2 decades, the O'Shaughnessy family didn't spend a week at a New England beach in August. We spent the 4th of July at Walt Disney World. It put her and each of us on a plane for the very first time, which was huge and intimidating for her. And though she had 4 little men with her, she planned and did this without her husband taking charge. So this was life-changing and empowering for her. And when we got there, she brought us on It's a Small World, and it gave her great happiness to see us share that with her. Since her passing, I've experienced It's a Small World in Anaheim, California, Orlando, Florida, and Paris, France. And often to the annoyance of whoever's with me, and I make go on that ride. Because either you love or you hate It's a Small World. And for those of you that have only been to It's a Small World in Orlando, it's the shortest, quickest one. If you go to California or if you go anyplace else, it's much longer and much more painful. So each time I go now, I privately call out her picture on my phone so that she shares that ride with me. So finally, and in closing, I promise, my mom is a really modest, simple, and introverted person. Imagine that. When trying to determine what to name in her honor, I had thought about places on campus that would have more public exposure and more prominence, and that I would be able to see every day. But when I saw the purpose of this simple but significant lab modestly tucked in the back corner of this showcase building, I knew this testing lab was most appropriate. It suits her personality, it suits her life work, it suits her in acknowledging what eventually got the best of her. So on this day, January 15th, 2019, my mom's birthday, a birthday she was also proud to share with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is also his official birthday. I humbly dedicate the Dorothy A. Guarnera RN Testing Laboratory. So thanks.